Katie's heart clenched with worry as she noticed her usually chatty 4-year-old son, Jack, had fallen unnervingly silent. His laughter, once a constant melody that filled their home with warmth and joy, had vanished, leaving behind an eerie quiet that unsettled Katie deeply. Every time she looked at him, she saw not the bright, joyful boy she once knew, but a child whose eyes were now clouded with sadness. His silence weighed on her like a dark cloud. A shiver ran down her spine every time their eyes met, and with each passing day, Jack's silence grew more pronounced. The absence of his voice haunted Katie, her heart telling her that something was horribly wrong. Katie, a devoted mother in her early 30s, had always cherished the special bond she shared with Jack. Their lives had always been filled with shared moments of love and connection. The daily ritual of breakfast together, the way they read bedtime stories in exaggerated voices, or the simple joy of playing with blocks, it all made up the fabric of their lives. To see her once vibrant little boy now so withdrawn was like a dagger to her heart. It felt as though her bright, joyful Jack had disappeared, leaving behind a shell of the child she once knew. Her maternal instincts screamed that something was wrong, and she knew she had to uncover the truth. The shift in Jack's behavior had coincided with the arrival of Katie's mother-in-law, Martha. Martha had recently started helping with childcare, offering to give Katie and David some relief as they balanced work and family life. At first, Martha's offer seemed like a blessing. Katie had thought it would be good for Jack to spend time with his grandmother. But ever since Martha's presence became more regular, Jack's demeanor changed. The outgoing, playful boy who had once greeted Katie every morning with a hug was now quiet, distant, as though he was retreating into himself. His sparkling eyes, once filled with curiosity and joy, had dimmed, replaced by a dull, pained expression that Katie couldn't ignore. Katie's instinct screamed that something was off, but she had no concrete evidence to back her suspicions. It wasn't like Martha had been overtly cruel or harsh in front of her, but Katie couldn't ignore the subtle tension in Jack's posture whenever his grandmother was near. Martha's overbearing presence seemed to have a stifling effect on Jack, and the more time she spent with him, the more he withdrew. It was hard for Katie to confront these feelings because, on the surface, Martha had always been kind. But was it all a facade? What made it even more complicated was the growing tension between Katie and Martha. What had once been a cordial and even friendly relationship had soured over time. Martha's constant critiques of Katie's parenting choices and judgmental remarks had chipped away at Katie's confidence as a mother. It wasn't just the big things that bothered Katie, but the little comments, the way Martha would say, "Well, in my day, we did things differently," or the subtle digs about Katie's choices around nutrition or discipline. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and it had worn Katie down. Katie could feel herself losing control, and the worsening situation with Jack was adding to her stress. Every morning, she would wake up with a pit in her stomach, dreading what the day might bring. She began to wonder if Martha's presence in their home was doing more harm than good. Her instincts told her that there was a direct link between Jack's sudden change in behavior and his time spent with his grandmother. But without evidence, how could she address it without causing a family rift? Katie was determined to find out the truth. It wasn't just a matter of protecting her own sanity, she had to protect Jack. He was her little boy, and the idea that someone might be hurting him, even emotionally, filled her with a fierce determination. She would stop at nothing to get to the bottom of it. The tension came to a head one afternoon during Jack's birthday party. What was supposed to be a joyous celebration felt strained. Katie watched as Martha hovered over Jack, controlling every little detail of the party. "Now, Jack, sit properly," Martha snapped when he shifted in his seat. Jack flinched slightly, his little face turning pale. Katie's heart ached watching him. She wanted to jump in and tell Martha to back off, but with so many guests around, she didn't want to cause a scene. Later that night, as she put Jack to bed, she noticed how tightly he clung to her, as though he was afraid to let go. It was then that Katie made up her mind. She would confront Martha. She needed answers. Katie began the next morning, her voice quiet but firm as they sat in the kitchen over coffee. "Have you noticed anything different about Jack lately? He's been so quiet, and I can't help but feel like something's wrong." Martha didn't even look up from her cup. "Oh, Katie," she said dismissively, "children go through phases. I've raised 3, remember. Jack's just in one of those quiet spells. He'll snap out of it soon enough." Katie felt a surge of frustration bubbling up inside her. Martha's flippant response felt like a slap in the face. How could she be so dismissive of something so serious? Jack wasn't just going through a phase. Katie knew her son, and she knew that something more was going on. "You don't understand," Katie said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This isn't just a phase. Jack's not himself anymore. I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong, and I think it might have to do with..." She hesitated, unsure how to finish the sentence without sounding accusatory. But Martha cut her off before she could continue. "You're being overly sensitive," Martha said with a wave of her hand. "You young mothers today, always worrying about every little thing. You have to toughen up. Jack's fine. He's a boy, and boys don't always talk about their feelings." The condescension in Martha's tone made Katie's blood boil. How could she be so dismissive? Katie's frustration deepened, but she knew she couldn't let this go. Her instincts screamed that there was more to Jack's silence than Martha was letting on. She had to find the truth, but how? That night, as Katie lay awake, she made a difficult decision. If she couldn't get answers through a conversation, she would have to take matters into her own hands. She would set up a hidden camera. It was a drastic step, but it was the only way to get to the bottom of what was happening when she wasn't around. Katie felt a surge of determination as she purchased a small, discreet camera online. She would do whatever it took to protect her son. When the camera arrived, Katie carefully placed it in the living room, hidden among the bookshelves where it would capture everything. She felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach as she did it, but she knew it was the only way to uncover the truth. She couldn't shake the sense of urgency that gnawed at her. Whatever was happening, it needed to be exposed before Jack's silence became permanent. The strain of the situation was taking its toll not only on Katie's relationship with Martha but also on her marriage. David was growing frustrated with Katie's growing distrust of his mother. He couldn't understand why she was so adamant that Martha was to blame for Jack's behavior. "David, please," Katie pleaded one evening as they sat together on the couch. "I know you love your mother, but something is happening when I'm not around. Jack isn't the same. We have to protect him." David rubbed his temples, his expression one of exhaustion. "Katie, I think you're overreacting. My mom loves Jack. She would never hurt him. You've always had a good relationship with her. Why would you think she's doing something now?" Katie's heart ached. She felt utterly alone in her fight to protect their son. The man she loved, the father of her child, couldn't see the truth. It was tearing them apart. David's loyalty to his mother was blinding him to the pain Jack was in, and it was driving a wedge between them. The days passed slowly as Katie anxiously reviewed the footage from the hidden camera. At first, there was nothing of note. She watched hours of footage that showed Jack playing quietly or sitting alone while Martha read a book. It was maddening. She felt like she was on the edge of a discovery, but there was nothing concrete. Then, after days of endless searching, she finally found it. The moment that would change everything. In one clip, Katie watched as Martha's tone with Jack shifted from grandmotherly to cruel. Jack had been playing quietly with his toys when Martha's voice, cold and sharp, cut through the air. "I told you to sit still," she snapped at him, her words filled with irritation. Katie watched in horror as her son visibly recoiled, his small body shrinking in fear. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't make a sound. Martha's cold demeanor was heart-wrenching, and the look of defeat on Jack's face was more than Katie could bear. In that moment, everything clicked into place. Martha had been subtly tormenting Jack, breaking him down with harsh words and sharp reprimands when no one was looking. Katie's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the depth of the emotional abuse her son had endured. The tension she had felt for weeks was finally validated, but the relief of knowing the truth was overshadowed by the pain of what Jack had been through. Katie couldn't wait any longer. She needed to confront Martha, but more importantly, she needed to show David what had been happening right under their noses. That night, after Jack had gone to bed, Katie sat David down at the kitchen table. "You need to see this," she said, her voice trembling as she opened the laptop and played the footage. David watched in silence as the clip unfolded. His face grew pale as the realization of what he was seeing sank in. When the video ended, he looked up at Katie, his expression a mixture of disbelief and guilt. "I didn't know," David whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I had no idea." Katie's eyes filled with tears as she reached across the table to take his hand. "I know you didn't," she said softly. "But now we have to do something about it. We have to protect Jack." Together, they made the difficult decision to confront Martha and to cut ties with her for good. The confrontation was explosive, as Katie had anticipated. Martha denied everything at first, but when confronted with the footage, she fell silent. Her cold indifference was chilling, and Katie's heart broke as she realized that this woman, who had once seemed so loving, had been emotionally damaging Jack all along. "How could you?" Katie demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "How could you treat him like that?" Martha's face was stony as she replied, "He's just a child, he'll get over it." But Katie's resolve was firm. "Not if I can help it," she said, her voice filled with determination. "We're done, Martha. You're not welcome here anymore." With Martha out of their lives, Katie and David focused on healing their family. The road ahead would be long, but they were determined to rebuild the bond that had been damaged. Jack slowly began to emerge from his shell, his laughter returning in small bursts that brought tears of joy to Katie's eyes. Though the scars of Martha's cruelty would take time to heal, Katie knew that they had made the right decision. She had trusted her instincts, fought for her son, and protected him from harm. The future, once clouded with fear and uncertainty, now seemed bright. Katie knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she and her family would face them together stronger and more united than ever before.